Hey, welcome back to Swanson's Garage. Been working on a little bit of shop tool stuff here lately. I recently picked up this shrinker stretcher tool set. That's the stretcher, that's the shrinker. If you're not familiar with them, what you do is you stick a piece of sheet metal in the throat here and you just push down on the handle, and the little dies in there either shrink or stretch the edge of the metal like so. So this was a straight piece. I put it in there and a few clamps there with the shrinker and a few stretches there with the stretcher, and you get yourself a curved flange. Same thing with the straight piece, just a scrap just to play with it a little bit. But that'll really come in handy when we start making sheet metal projects. Specifically, if you watched the recent video where I started working on the ends of the gas tank, and we do this hemmed over edge where that end of the tank crimps on to the body of the tank, it all crinkled and puckered on me, right? Well, now that I have a shrinker, I'll be able to shrink that, and when I fold it over, it should be a nice neat hem. One of the projects I picked that up for, I know I'll use it for that, and I'm sure I'll use it for a lot of other things now that I have it. I was trying to figure out what to mount them on. Well, then it dawned on me after I thought about it a while. I have this oddball folding metal sawhorse that I picked up for free, actually. A guy was going to throw it away. The only thing really wrong with it is that it has these adjustable extension legs on it, so you can make this whole sawhorse taller. This is set down all the way low now, but you can make it taller. Well, one of these extension legs is missing, so if we get really ambitious someday, I might make another one of them, but as it is, it'll work just fine at the lowest setting. And then what's nice is that you could take and fold it up like this, so that makes it nice and compact to be able to store away when I'm not using it. And as you know, in a little shop like this, space is at a premium, so I need to be able to put stuff away. And of course, it's just bolted on with two bolts from the bottom, so I could take them back off too and use the sawhorse as a regular sawhorse, or mount them to something else if I need to in the future. So that's kind of cool. Another tool to our arsenal of things available to us. And as long as I was in the tool fixing, making better mode, I think I'm going to do a few improvements to this press here today. So I've noticed one issue with this China Freight Special press is that this table where they welded it together is not welded together even remotely straight and flat. So to make it sit flat, I currently have a piece of scrap steel on either corner. So if I pull them out of there, the table rocks on the pins. And that's why I was struggling, initially using this thing. Is that you get it set up and then you start putting some pressure on it and it would move, and then your part would kink and you wouldn't get a straight press, and that's no good when you're dealing with high pressures, of course. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is cut these welded angle irons out of here, clean them up. I rounded up some stuff I have here. I have a piece of all thread, cut that in half. It'll be perfect length. I got some big nuts, drill bit to drill a hole through. I got a chunk of just scrap steel here, box tubing, rectangle tubing. I'll cut that to the appropriate length for here, and then we will just bolt it. I'll drill through and bolt it all together. That's how we did it at home with our press we built, and that works just fine. And what's nice about that is actually an advantage, is you can take it apart to put odd parts that won't fit in an otherwise You could take it apart, put your part inside, bolt it back together, and press things apart. We've used that to our advantage a few times. And I got to thinking, I think I brought this back inside. I had this loaded up on the back of the truck to bring back home to do just that, what I just said, doing the press back home. But I think I might just have enough room if I can take those arms apart. I might be able to just squeeze this in there then to try to get this pressed apart. If you remember, we were trying to do that a few episodes back. So let's see what we can get done here today. Okay, cut apart, ground up, clamped together, drilled out, pieces, spacers cut, threaded rods cut. We should be able to put this thing together now. See if it's any better than it was. It's still, it's a China special. The more I look at this thing, the more it's like, oh man. I've discovered these C-channels are not square. So this top surface, I'll get a straight edge here. Top edge is not flat because they are not square C-channel. But hopefully at least it'll sit flat now. We're gaining. There, all back together. It is an improvement. There's no more shims needed. It sits nice and flat, and it's take apartable now. So because it's take apartable, let's see if by chance we can get this in there and do anything about getting it apart. See if that'll work or not. Okay, I managed to, it does fit in there. So I got it in there, got it started. It is moving. I got some blocks underneath here, so if it does decide to come free too quickly without me being able to catch it in time, it doesn't fall and crash to the floor and wreck something. Let's continue and see if we can get it apart. I'm glad that it worked. Came apart. So now we got more parts to clean up. We just got to figure out how to get this part apart now. I'm not sure yet how that bearing and assembly, if this comes off the shaft or what. I'll have to study the parts book a little bit more, see if there's any clues about that. But we're at the same point of disassembly as this clutch assembly for the other tractor now, so that was time well spent modifying that press. We saved ourselves a trip back and forth to Wisconsin to do that at least. Okay, after studying the parts book here a little bit, I figured out that that collar slides on the shaft. It looks like it holds that bearing tight to the end of the shaft, which is also the gear, and it also encapsulates with that little lip there this other flanged piece of the clutch. So knowing that, I set it up in the press here to see how tight of a fit it is on there, and it moved pretty easily. So I'm going to clean up the rest of this shaft and hopefully get it rest of the way apart now. We've had to get a little creative here with spacers blocking. I realize wood is not the best solution for a press, but it's coming really simple, really easy I should say, so it's okay. Just about there now. Got a board down there to catch it when it falls. I imagine it's going to let go here. There we go, any second now. There, all apart except for the bearing. Let's see what we got. Okay, so now that part comes out. You can see the opposite side of there that holds the bearing. We can see the bearing now. It's a Fafner 409. You're probably asking, well, why did I even bother taking this apart? Well, a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to be able to get access to thoroughly inspect this bearing and clean it to make sure it was good, because there again, it's deep into the tractor. If we get this all back together and then we realize that this bearing was no good, it would be a royal pain in the butt to take everything back apart to replace this bearing. So the whole tractor would need to be split. The whole clutch would have to come apart like it is now. And I don't want to have to do that when the tractor is back together. So now is the time. I don't know yet whether I'll take the bearing actually off the shaft here or not. I might, but at least now I can clean it all up and inspect it. So now we can see if we can do that same process to this clutch. Hopefully it comes apart just as easily. That one came apart nicely too. It's nice when things cooperate and go as planned. Everything looks good from what I can tell. This bearing is actually on the other way. The numbers are on the back side, so it must not matter which way those particular bearings are installed. I got lots of parts to clean up now. Sometime later we have before and after. So I got basically one whole clutch assembly cleaned up, ready to go. Few things of note. These pivot pins are hardened, so those should not be worn, I don't think. The file hardly scratches them, so those are hard pins there. The bearing cleaned up very nicely. I just took a can of brake clean and sprayed it all out and sprayed it all out and sprayed it all out some more until it was perfectly clean. I looked at it really closely. There is no rust, no pitting, spins freely. I think we're good to go there. Happy with that. I cleaned out. There is a grease bore that goes down to this hole here. So the purpose of that is so you have either a grease cup or a grease fitting in the throwout fork yoke to get into lube where that is pivoting on that part. So that greases that. It also, the grease eventually works its way into that through hole, which goes into the center, which this piece is lubing that piece where that's pivoting up and down on that shaft. Eventually it gets into this through hole, into the center there, which is on here, which ultimately lines up with this hole, which works its way out to the end here, which eventually gets the grease all the way to your throwout bearing, I believe is how that all works, best I can tell right now. We'll figure that out a little bit more once we start putting things all back together here, which I guess is one of my next steps. All I have left to do is cut a felt seal for inside of here. I just rounded up. I got some scraps of felt that should work for that. So that's one of my next steps. I've cleaned up all the hardware, new lock washers on everything. I'm just going to leave this original brake material. One, because I haven't been able to source this woven brake material in this 3/16 thickness in this a big enough piece to replace it. And even if I could replace it, find a piece to replace it, I don't think it's really necessary. I've been, I there again took a can of brake clean and sprayed this all up, cleaned it all up really good. And it's really not worn. When you measure it, it's right at full thickness. I took and set all these rivets and peened them all over on the back side a little bit more, just for good measure. You can see that they're comfortably below the surface of the brake material, so I'm not worried about that. I think we're good to go there. And it's not like it's basically just like a transmission brake a little bit to slow it down when you're trying to shift gears or whatever, so you don't grind gears. It's not used a tremendous amount there. So I think we're okay there. We'll just leave that as is. All these other parts cleaned up really nicely. The only thing I have left to round up is the correct copper rivets, the flathead countersunk head rivets, to redo the brake shoe or clutch shoes rather. I have to get them yet, but other than that, and we still have to fix this throwout yoke. It's all wore out. We'll have to get that probably built up and remachined. I'm thinking it's probably the easiest solution there. Get it brazed up and turn it back down true. So yeah, I think I'm going to start maybe putting things together here a little bit and kind of dry fit and everything. Make sure everything looks good. And we'll go from there. So I dry fitted everything back together here. Really happy. All the pins, everything looks good. Nothing is really worn at all. Having those hard pins, I think, really helped. There's a little bit of play in these two linkages, but I think some of that's actually designed because that's where things are in and out, pivoting. Need a little bit of movement there. Everything else is actually nice and tight. Really happy with that. These are nice on here, no looseness or anything. I think we're good to go. So last night I got that felt seal made. I wish there was a better way to cut them. Does anybody know any tricks? So to my knowledge, unless you have the appropriate size punches to punch them out, which of course I don't have the right size for that, there's no real good way to do that besides marking it out and just cutting it out with a knife or whatever very carefully, which is what I did, and you know how that works. It never turns out quite perfect. So if anybody knows any other tricks to doing that, I'm all ears. Leave a comment below. Got it together though. Next issue, I've been dry fitting things together here, making sure everything works. The next issue is the fit between this plate and the bearing is not quite as tight as it should be. See how I can just lift it right off like that? I would imagine this should be a slight interference fit in this bore so that bearing doesn't turn in the bore. Took the calipers and measured, and they agree that the bearing is slightly undersized of what this bore actually is by maybe 3 thou, which is probably quite a bit in my opinion. So we'll have to think about that, whether or not we can get some appropriate Loctite to put on there to prevent that bearing from spinning, or if we end up checking out the parts on the Michigan tractor, if that bore is maybe a little bit tighter, where we can use that part instead. I really don't want to start swapping gears and stuff, even if they were good on the Michigan tractor, which they might not be. The gears in that transmission are pretty rough. But I like to keep the match set of gears with this, with the gears that are in the transmission, if at all possible. So it's not like completely bad, but it ain't good, put it that way for right now. But other than that, let's see if I can. I mean, it's close because you got to have it perfectly lined up before it slips on. So it's not as if it's completely wallowed out, but it needs to be a little bit tighter than that in my opinion. But besides that, things are looking pretty good so far. So out of curiosity, I checked this one, the other clutch parts, and same thing, calipered. And this one is how it should be. The bearing is just a little bit bigger than the bore, so there's just a slight interference fit in here, which is how it should be. So at least we know when we get to this tractor, we'll be okay. We just got to figure out a little something to alleviate this problem. Like I said, a little bit of Loctite probably would fix the problem, and that's kind of our plan B if we don't have another good part in the Michigan tractor. but just something we'll have to address. That, and like I mentioned before, we'll have to get this built up and remachined to take all that slop out of there. But other than that, the clutch is looking pretty good. I think we could probably move on to the next thing. I got in some materials. I ended up going with just a 1-inch trade size EMT conduit. It's a thin wall conduit. It's really close to the right size as this original spark plug wire tube. It's not dead on, but it's close enough. Side by side, you can't even tell, put it that way. Cut it to length with the pipe cutter. I just got done belling the ends as original. How I did that was on the anvil here, I took the ball peen hammer and just started slowly forming that shape into the end of it. And then when I got it close to where I wanted, I put the hardy in the anvil here. And same thing, just worked it around and around with the ball peen end of the ball, with the ball end of the ball peen hammer, just to sharpen up that bell a little bit. Worked really good. Just like original, same length. I just got done marking out my centers of my holes. So I'll go set it up in the drill press and see if we can make this project complete today. I'll jump ahead to the finished product here. I got it all drilled out, cut the slot, got it all deburred, so there's no sharp edges for the spark plug wires to rub on. That's pretty important. Give it a quick sandblast to take some of that galvanized finish off, so it'll paint up nicely, because painting over galvanized is always less than ideal. I did round up some stock to make the spark plug wire tube hold down clamps. It's the right thickness, but it's a little bit wider than necessary. So I think what I'll do is I'll just pause this part of the project until I get home, because it'll be super easy to clamp this in the milling machine, mill it off to the right width, and then form it up. Otherwise, trying to cut it and sand it and whatever, you know how that's going to turn out. We'll just wait until I have the right tools available. We're a long way from needing that anyway, so it can wait. So we'll put that stuff on the shelf for now, and I think we will move on to the next project. I thank y'all for watching. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please consider doing that. I appreciate all your comments you leave. I read every one of them, and I try to reply to all of them. See you guys next week.